IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and wish you a very happy new year. I'm Shrikrishna Upadhyaya, the host of the special episode of All Things Policy. Today, I'll be talking to the researchers and my colleagues at the Takshashila Institution with a simple demand. I'll be asking them to make their predictions for this new year of 2024. And mind you, they cannot just be any predictions. They must be around public policy or important global or national events which have a bearing on public policy. And of course, each prediction will have to be backed up by solid reasoning. The purpose of this exercise is to not only analyze what we already know to accurately forecast likely events or changes in the future, but also to examine the assumptions we make while making these predictions, once they turn out to be true or false in a year's time. So I'll be asking some of them about what happened to their last year's prediction as well, and I'm excited to find out who got it right and who were unlucky. So let's dive right into the special episode of All Things Policy, Forecasting 2024. So first up, we have Anupam Manur, Professor of Economics at the Takshashila Institution. Welcome, Anupam, and a very happy new year to you.
Happy New Year as well to you and all the listeners.
So Anupam, did you make any predictions last year on the show?
No, I think I successfully dodged that bullet, but this time you've caught me, so we'll see how this goes.
Sure. This time you're going to be making predictions, and I believe you're going to be making predictions on the global macroeconomic environment, and you have more than one. So I'm very eager to listen to you. Listen from you as to what your predictions are and why are you making them.
First off, I probably want to start with a joke.
Right.
This is a standard dig at macroeconomists, which is that macroeconomists were created to make weather forecasters look good. As in,
Right.
So we tend to get it more wrong than anybody else. So with that big caveat out of the way, I want to just paint a picture of how the global macroeconomic kind of scenario will play out in 2024. And we're thinking that growth. So, by the way, every single macroeconomist almost got it wrong for 2023, where we expected a slowdown in global economic growth, but it exceeded everybody's expectations. And I think overall growth was about 3%, which is quite good.
Yeah.
This year, we're expecting that slowdown to actually take place. So you can expect something in the range of 2.6 to 2.9% overall GDP growth. Then you have certain things which will contribute to it, some things which will take away from it, right? The US economy has been incredibly resilient and strong. And I think some of that strength will continue, but you will start to see some kind of slowdown because of the aggressive rate hikes done by the Federal Reserve. So in all of 2021 and 22, 22 and 23, the Federal Reserve kept hiking rates. So I think some of that will start showing up in more subdued kind of economic activity in the US. So you can expect something like 2 to 2.5% GDP growth in the US as against about 3.4% now. So that will be one slowdown. The other bit I think which will happen is that there will be rate cuts. So the US Federal Reserve has indicated that, so this is not a prediction, they've themselves indicated that they will do about 3 rate cuts, maybe of 25 basis points each. So you can expect totally a 75 basis points rate cut in the US. And I think most other central banks will follow suit. So I know India, for example, we've kept the repo rate constant for 5 months. It's all the way from April. So at 5 consecutive kind of meetings, we've kept it constant. But I think maybe in the second half of 2024, we will begin to see rate cuts all around the world. So you'll have, and that is generally good news for India. So you'll have greater liquidity. So, you'll have greater FDI. You'll have more FIIs coming in the later part of the year, which will also help in terms of the rupee might appreciate a little bit. It might also result in greater forex reserve. So all of these are predictions. We'll see how it goes. And I think you'd also see that India's own growth story will be, it's a mixed bag really, because on one hand, if you have slightly subdued global GDP growth And the other prediction is that you will have further kind of contraction in global trade. So in this 2023, we did see a big contraction in trade by about, I think, $500 billion or something of that sort. So you will see a further contraction with, all these deglobalization, things like friendshoring and higher protectionist measures taken. That does not bode very well for India. And so that, along with the idea that maybe US slightly decelerating, is not great. Those are the kind of negative factors. But on the positive side, you could also see that China might be slowing down, and not China might be. I'm making quite a bold prediction that they will slow down further, and I think you can expect about 4 to 4.5% GDP growth of China, which means that if we play our cards right, and that is a big if, we can actually do that. China plus one strategy, we can actually attract investments. It'll also put downward pressure on global commodity prices, both oil and so on. So that is good for us. So on those fronts, I think that will help. So in terms of prediction of Indian GDP growth, I think you can look at something like 6.5 to 6.8%. Again, that's quite a bold prediction, but we'll see what happens. That's probably how the global scenario will look like.
Thanks, Anupam, for making those bold predictions and putting your neck out on the line this year, if not last year when you dodged a bullet. But one small tangential follow-up question that I have before I let you go is that, 2024 happens to be the year where about 50 countries in the world are going into elections, right? And over 2 billion people will be voting and choosing new leaders or re-electing the same leaders. And this is, I think, once in a lifetime kind of an event where so many people in so many countries will be voting. So in your macroeconomic assessment, will this play a part? And based on this, what would you like to predict?
Right. So that's a googly asking election questions to a macroeconomist. But I think some things you can expect. If so many states are going for elections, then you can expect a greater fiscal push in many of these countries. Yeah. We know that during elections time, governments spend a lot in order to, make sure that they win the elections. So you will see a greater fiscal push. Now, that can play out in many different ways. Greater fiscal push, for example, if it is in things like infrastructure, etc., that will add to GDP growth and global GDP growth. It could also mean that they're importing more from the rest of the world. That can be good, but it could also mean that they're giving out freebies. They could, again, depends on how those things go. I don't want to make predictions on that, but you could also see this playing a part in kind of higher debt. So global debt, as it is kind of worsening, and it's always kind of going from bad to worse. And I think that will further escalate at this point in time. So that is part one of what happens before the election. So you'll have a fiscal push that can either result in greater spending, or and that greater spending could be fueled by debt. Right? So that is one part. But the other part is also, again, no electoral predictions, but depends on the way that the wind is flowing. So you could either have, a resurgence of kind of right wing or left wing or populism and so on. So those things will matter. So if you have, for example, a large number of, let's say, anti-immigrant, closed border, populist, autarkic kind of governments coming in, it will have a massive impact on global trade. And if it has a massive impact on global trade, you can see a further contraction in trade, labor movement, capital movement, and that will affect India negatively.
Thanks, Anupam, for taking your time out and joining me. Meet you again next year to check whether your predictions have come true or not.
Hopefully everybody forgets what I've said. Thank you.
I'll remember. So next up with me, I have Anushka Saxena. Anushka is a research analyst with the Indo-Pacific program at Takshashila. She studies China and is an emerging China expert. So Anushka, a very happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you as well, Shri, and to all of our listeners.
Thanks. So, Anushka, I believe last year you were not here to make any predictions. So, in 2024, you're going to be making a prediction about China, I believe, and you'll have to give me your prediction and also, the reasons as to why you're making this claim.
Right. So this is definitely a very interesting exercise, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to make a prediction this time. And it's a bit of a debatable and controversial one, but I'm happy to go ahead and make it nonetheless and give my reasons. So for this year, my prediction is that, contrary to what some of the US intelligence estimates would lead you to believe, the Chinese People's Liberation Army is not preparing to invade Taiwan in 2024. This is because, as per our research ideas, which were also published in the form of a paper in May earlier this year, in 2023, there are some potential telltale signs for when China might be preparing to invade Taiwan, and none of them are currently visible. And these range from military and economic, such as the mobilization of contingency reserves and contingency logistics support brigades in the PLA, to the incentivizing of Taiwanese chip making and high technology talent by the US to flee the island in large numbers. However, the caveat that I attach with my prediction is, like a good scholar, is that the only way by which China might indeed end up planning an attack short of a full scale invasion, because its current economic situation simply wouldn't allow that, is if the newly elected president of the 2024 Taiwanese election declares independence of the island.
Right. Essentially, to sum it up, your prediction is that in 2024, China will not be launching a full scale invasion of Taiwan. But you did caveat that with saying, oh, there might be certain contingencies which might come up, which may force China's hand. But other than what you just explained, are there any other indicators that you have looked at in order to make this prediction?
As I mentioned, the indicators of when China might be preparing to carry out a full scale invasion against Taiwan can be subcategorized according to our research as military, economic, or miscellaneous, which covers tech related and narrative related signs. So the military signs would, as I of course mentioned, the mobilization of contingency reserves. The military signs would be that, but also the movement of mobile ICBM brigades. Some of them are housed in central China, and it's likely that these mobile ICBM brigades will be moved closer to the Eastern Theater Command when the command is preparing for an invasion against Taiwan. The most important equipment required for an amphibious assault and for an urban warfare scenario will be located within coastal provinces like Jiangsu and Guangdong, where again the PLA Eastern Theater. Similarly, the other thing would be that all the equipment in the People's Liberation Army that is important for an amphibious assault and urban warfare scenario, such as Type 052D guided missile destroyers, large warships, so on and so forth, will be placed within coastal provinces like Jiangsu and Guangdong, where again the PLA Eastern and Southern Theater Commands are posted. And we would also see through geospatial intelligence the extensive building of entities like field hospitals and emergency units like shipyards close to the bases in the Eastern and the Southern Theater Commands, which is similar to what we observed when Russia was planning its invasion against Ukraine. The economic signs would, of course, be China looking to convert some of its dollar reserves, which are over US $3 trillion, yes, converting some of them into gold. This is because gold is still a coveted commodity. And if China needs currency in exchange for gold, it could undertake such a transaction in the face of sanctions. The Chinese People's Bank could liquidate assets from the New York Federal Reserve Bank. And of course, there'll be greater restrictions exercised over the outward flow of both capital and talent from the country. And finally, domestically, we will also observe a continued narrative shift wherein the Communist Party of China officials and party-backed news platforms would talk about the need for the people to unite, prepare for revolution and reunification, but at the same time also focus on preparing for hard times, frugality, economic challenges, socially and economically, so on and so forth.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. And I hope to God that your prediction comes true. I don't think the world needs any more wars, given that we are already having so many conflicts around the globe. Thanks for joining me, Anushka, and we will come back to you next year on All Things Policy to check your prediction.
Hoping for the best. Thanks, Shri.
And now with me, I have Manoj K Ramani, the chairperson of the Indo-Pacific Studies program at Takshashila and our very own China dude. Welcome, Manoj, and a very happy new year to you.
Thanks so much, Shri. Happy New Year to you and Happy New Year to all our listeners.
Great. So, Manoj, I believe you'll be making predictions on China, and you have two of those for us. So, let's jump right to it and tell us your prediction and the reason as to why you're forecasting that.
Yeah, the first prediction that I have is that there will be no war in the Taiwan Strait. Given the nature of the world today and the fact that we are in cascading conflicts, it's quite a tricky prediction, but I think that I'm quite safe to assume that there will be no war. Next year, in early January, we are supposed to have an election in Taiwan, a presidential election. It looks at present that the ruling DPP's new candidate, William Lai-ching, he will become the president, but it's still a fairly close contest. Um, it depends, and the DPP has been sort of so-called pro-independence, and there's been talk about whether that will lead to more Chinese pressure on Taiwan, which can result in a cascading set of events. I don't see that necessarily happening because the Taiwanese voter is also quite divided, and it's not entirely sure that the DPP will control the presidency and the legislature. So that can also lead to some degree of friction. To me, Beijing will continue doing what it's doing, which is gray zone tactics, because conflict doesn't necessarily suit its interests at present. So all the hype around that to me doesn't work.
All right. I think Joe Biden will be very happy listening to your prediction because I'm sure he doesn't want any more disturbance in the election here in the US, right? So, anyway, so what's your second prediction?
My second prediction is something that I think it's been talked about for quite a few years now, but it's not really happened. Every year in March, you have the Chinese premier present a government work report, which is like a State of the Union address kind of thing, where they talk about the economy predominantly. That document usually entails the announcement of an annual GDP target. Historically, because Chinese economic policies have prioritized high GDP growth since the last 30, 40 years. You've always seen a GDP target set and the GDP targets achieved eventually because, of course, they never miss their targets because these are political objects. But for the last few years, we've been seeing this discussion that with Xi Jinping shifting away from high growth to a high quality growth objective, there's more political influence on economic policy today. It's no longer economics first, it's politics first. Security is much more important, and so on and so forth. There's been discussion of whether we will see a growth target. Also, is it sexy to have a growth target which is not very high?
Right.
Politically, and all indicators suggest that this year China will hit 5+% growth. Their official target was 5%, but in 2024, estimates from the IMF, Goldman Sachs, UBS all indicate growth ranges between 4.4 to 4.8%. And the recent in December, the Chinese government had a economic work conference, which didn't inspire too much confidence in pursuing higher growth because there was no talk of stimulus or anything like that. So all that tells you that the growth will be below 5%. Now, is that worth announcing as a target? Does that make political sense? I don't think so. So therefore, I think that this might be the first year in 2024 where you don't see the Chinese leadership announce a specific target for growth. It also makes sense for them not to do it because this is the first year that the new premier Li Qiang will be presenting his work report. So it can be sort of like this new trend that is being set. So that's my other prediction, that this might be the year where you will actually see the Chinese government not announce a growth target. And that will have a cascading impact in terms of people's assessments of the Chinese economy and also for local governments in China in terms of how they set their targets and their agenda. So interesting times ahead.
Yeah. So quick follow-ups on that. So one, are you saying this will be a one-off thing in 2024? Will the growth target come back, say, in the later years, or this is gone forever? And the second question is, how do you think the government will spin this? Because it might also be interpreted as a sign of weakness, right? Because the economy is slowing down, so maybe the government is just scared now to put targets out there.
I think the spin is not too difficult because the spin will be around we're no longer pursuing high growth. It's a structural thing. We're pursuing high quality growth. And therefore, you can't just measure it in GDP. You measure it in environmental improvement. You measure it in livelihood improvement. You measure it in so many other ways. So therefore, GDP doesn't capture the breadth of our improvement. In terms of whether this will be a one-off, I don't think so. If it happens, it will become staple.
All right. Thanks, Manoj. And we'll come back to you next year to check on your predictions and see if they have come true or not. So thanks and see you again on All Things Policy.
Thanks so much.
So next up, we have Suman Joshi. Suman is a program manager of the Advanced Public Policy program at Takshashila. She teaches and writes on public policy and economic policy and so on. Very happy to have you here, Suman, and a very happy New Year to you.
Hi, Shri. Happy New Year to you too.
Thanks. So, Suman, I believe you made some predictions last year. So, could you tell us what it is and how did it fare?
Yeah, very embarrassing, but yeah, that's how predictions go, I guess. You win some, you don't win, you lose some. Yeah, so this was one of those losing ones. Yeah, I had predicted that we will have a judgment on the hijab case in Karnataka. The reason I had predicted that was it formed a very important part of the Karnataka elections, the narratives around the Karnataka elections. So I thought the Supreme Court will take it up and put a closure to that topic. I mean, it could have clubbed various other cases into this and given an overarching judgment on the issue itself. But clearly, they didn't do it, and yeah, well, I was wrong, so it's fine. I mean, it's way it is.
So you said the decision would come out. You did not comment on the nature of the decision, whether the ban would be upheld or not.
I did say that the Supreme Court would allow, as in would protect individual choice and would protect individual liberty to,
Right.
To actually wear what they want to wear.
Yeah. So I think your prediction was only halfway off the mark. The decision did not come, but the decision could very well be what you're saying whenever it comes in this year or the next.
Yeah, let's see.
Right. So anyway, so what do you have for this year, the 2024? What is your prediction on a policy issue that you think is going to happen in the coming year?
Yeah. Policy issue for 2024, I think everything will revolve around the general elections. While some people say that it's kind of a foregone conclusion, but I think a week is a long time in politics and anything can happen. So we don't know which way it will go. But whichever way it goes, the next government, the imperative will remain the decadal census that needs to be done. Now, we've not had this it was supposed to be done 2020 and COVID and all issues after that. We've not had the 2021 census at all. So whichever government comes in play, I think it is fairly important and will be on the radar for whichever government that comes into power to at least to announce the census and give a kind of terms of reference for how the census will be done and what are the ways they will, what are the things that they will actually measure in this. Whether the caste census is a big issue, but my prediction is in the national census, we will not have a caste census. We will go the way we have been going all this while. States specifically might do a caste census of sorts, but I'm not really sure that the national census will cover this part. Yeah, so that is one part of it. I think it's important because a lot of policy decisions are informed by the census itself, the data. Now, all the decisions that have been made till date or in the last few years have relied on very old data. Now, if we want good policy decisions and if we want good policy outcomes, it is important that we have a good handle on the data itself. And I mean, goes without saying that if you have good data, you will have good decisions and good outcomes, therefore. So I think this will be one big thing once the new government comes to. That's my prediction for the year. I like to play it safe, at least this time around.
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree with you that it's a great travesty that the decadal census has not taken place in 2021. And, researchers and policymakers are working with data which is nearly 15 years old now, like the 2011 census. The caste data from that census was not released, as you remember. So let's hope this decadal census happens again. It's not a decadal census anymore. It's more of a 1.5 decadal census, just like how auto drivers in Bangalore say 1.5, right? But anyway, so you're saying the priority for the next government would be the announcement of a census, but a connected issue is of delimitation, right, Suman? Because the 2026 delimitation of constituencies, both Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha constituencies,
that is dependent on
the census,
and a lot of other things. Like they have announced the women's reservation bill to be dependent on delimitation, to be dependent on census. Right. So if we have to see some fruits, like some fruition to that policy, we need to see delimitation and then we need to see the census itself. Right. So I think a lot is riding on that in terms of...
So whichever government comes to power in 2024, you believe a census will be a top national priority for them. But you have also predicted that the caste census, which is a political issue now, gaining some currency in some places, will not be a part of the national census. So anyway, thanks Suman for making these predictions, and we'll come back to you next year to check on them.
Yeah, thanks, Shri. Bye.
And now with me, I have Pranay Kotasthane. Pranay is the Deputy Director of Takshashila Institution and is also the Chair of the High-Tech Geopolitics Research Program at Takshashila. Welcome, Pranay, and a very happy new year to you.
Yeah, same to you, too, Shri. And today I'm going to say how little I know, because I'm sure I'm going to make some wild predictions and get them wrong, but that's how we learn. So I'm going to take that risk.
Yeah, and I see that we have switched the seats now, because last year you were in my seat and asking these questions while I was making predictions with a bunch of others, but change of fortunes for both of us. And in fact, to just let you know, only one prediction made by Shambavi has actually come true.
Wow.
So the strike rate is not zero. Yeah. So maybe there is hope for all of us, right? So Pranay, what is your first prediction for this year?
Yeah, first of all, like I always say, this prediction thing is important from what Philip Tetlock calls outcome irrelevant learning, right? It is important to make predictions so that once you get them wrong, you reflect on what were the assumptions you made, and then you question your own priors. That's why making predictions is important. Otherwise, we are always in a positive feedback loop. We never question our assumptions. So what I thought is I'll make some predictions which are sort of, I mean, I'm taking a risk on these predictions in the sense that it is very easy to make predictions which are, one, very generic, second, which are generally saying some things which won't happen, right? A lot of things won't happen, but it's difficult to say what will actually happen and something that is measurable by the next year end, right? So I will try to make those predictions. These are mine, Shri. I will make 4 of them.
Okay.
So one of them is actually 5 of them. One is that I predict there will be at least an NSA level meeting between India and Pakistan in 2024. Now, my reasoning behind this is that there is going to be election in both Pakistan and India. Nawaz Sharif is already, no one knows in Pakistan when exactly the election will happen, but everyone knows who's going to be the Prime Minister. And Nawaz Sharif has often spoken about that there should be some sort of normalization now, given that Pakistan is in deep trouble. And with elections out of the way in India also, I think the environment might be okay to resume some sort of talks. I don't think there will be a PM level meet, but at least an NSA level meet and resumption of formal talks between India and Pakistan will happen this year.
This is after the new governments in both the countries have come into power.
Yeah. Right. So this is one of my predictions for this year. Second one, again, I have a couple of meeting related predictions. I think there will be a Modi-Xi meeting and there will be a Modi-Putin meeting this 2024. Now, again, Modi and Putin haven't met for some time after the Ukraine war, especially, and even recently, the external affairs minister was in Moscow, not the PM. So I suspect that because the Indian government is trying to chart its own pathway, trajectory, whether I agree or not is a different question. But my reading of the situation is that the Indian PM would want to meet both Putin and Xi in this year.
Right. So, and what about our friend Joe Biden? Because he's also going to face the election towards the end of 2024. So, do you foresee any meeting between him and Modi as well before that?
No, that is an easy win. I think definitely there will be a quad meeting this year. So that we don't even have to count in as a prediction, because it is very likely. In fact, it was going to happen on 26 Jan, but it was not a correct day to choose. 26 Jan is also an important day in Australia. The Australian PM was not going to come anyways. So it will happen later that year, whether it is Joe Biden or someone else. I think Quad Summit is highly likely.
Right. So you have 3 meeting predictions with Pakistan, China, and Russia at different levels. So what's your 4th one?
Yeah, the 4th one is that I think the semiconductor industry revenues in 2024 will be lesser than what they were in 2023. Globally.
Right.
So the reasoning behind this prediction is, again, a lot of last few years has been euphoria in the semiconductor industry because governments are pumping money. A lot of them are trying to do indigenization and industrial policy. But I think those measures will come to a halt this year because there will be a lot of pressure once these global supply chains are cut, and companies will struggle to find market matching will be difficult. Essentially, buyers will find it difficult to find suppliers will find it difficult to find buyers, and that will lead to some shocks and the revenues will decline.
Right. So, what about investments in the semiconductor industry? Will that be affected, or that's on upward
I think
trajectory?
investments will still be higher because governments are whatever they have promised. Not a lot of that has not even fructified yet. Right, they are still announcements. So those investments will probably continue this year as well. For example, the Indian government made its policy in 2021. There's still no fab yet. Right,
Yeah.
so that investment has not even been made. Maybe in 2024 they might make it. Similarly, for many other countries, investments by governments might actually increase next year, but overall revenues, I
Yeah.
think it will decline. And also semiconductor industry generally sees these cycles. Last few years were a euphoric cycle because of the pandemic, leading to an increased demand for digital goods of various sorts, but that sort of will probably decline. Also recessionary pressure, etc. So this is what I foresee.
All right. And what is going to happen to all those sitting on Nvidia stocks?
I can't make stock predictions. If I could have made that, I would have invested a lot more money in Nvidia many years ago. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So then your final prediction of
These were all the things that are likely to happen. One thing which is unlikely to happen, I think, is the census. Even though I saw that January 1st, the Registrar General of India was supposed to notify some procedures to start this process. The household notification, etc., are supposed to happen soon, and but I think it is unlikely. The reasoning for this again is I saw the Ministry of Home Affairs, Minister of State's response in the Lok Sabha in the winter session, where someone pointedly asked that when are you going to conduct the census, etc. And they gave a whole roundabout answer saying that, okay, COVID-19 was the reason why we didn't have census. And they never mentioned when is it likely next year. So I think it is difficult. And it's actually a big hit because census is a big proxy to understand the administrative capability of a nation state, and also the fact that certain numbers are not politicized. That's why the fact that India conducted its census regularly every 10 years for the past decades was a great sign of success. But it seems we are falling back on that. Unlike Pakistan, India did do census every 10 years. It was not so politicized as it was in Pakistan. I had written about the Pakistan scenario a few years ago, but looks like in India also that is the case. So, don't think it's going to happen in 2024. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I had this conversation with Suman also earlier on in this episode, and she said something similar, and our conclusion was we're not going to see a census at least until 2026 because the delimitation of assembly constituencies and the Lok Sabha constituencies is supposed to take place as per the census data from the first election held after 2026.
Right.
So it makes sense for the governments purely from a practical sense to wait it out till then and then conduct a census. And I think it, like you said, just a bit on the politicization aspect of it. I think recently the Home Minister made a statement in West Bengal that CAA is the law of the land and it is going to be implemented. They might have been delayed or whatever. And I think that is somehow also tied a bit to the census question in the sense of, the numbers, the data and all of it. So, of course, the census might be more political than ever before in the country.
Right. All right. So let's see at the end of 2024.
Yeah.
How many did we get right?
All right. Thank you so much, Pranay.
Thank you.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Okay, And with me now, we have Sorab Todi. Sorab is a research analyst with the High Tech Geopolitics program at Takshashila. And Sorab has recently been on a world tour and he's back with us. So, a very happy new year to you, Sorab. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Shri. Happy to be here.
Right. So, Saurabh, you made a couple of predictions last year and you told me, unfortunately, both of them did not work out. So, could you tell listeners what were these predictions and what do you think is the reason they didn't pan out?
Yeah, so I mean, I broadly had just one. I mean, the second one just flowed from the first one. So I predicted that 2023 would see the first export order of the HL Tejas aircraft. So that obviously
Right.
did not pan out, and I think my basis was that the president of Egypt was the chief guest for Republic Day last year, that is 2023, and that would really give an impetus to the proposal which has been floating around that Egypt is interested in buying the HL Tejas. So yeah, so there has not been much movement on that. There have been just reports that HL has proposed has offered Tejas. They are trying to figure out how to make the offer more lucrative. So all of that is going on in the background, but there's not much concrete that has happened on that. So, and my second one was, if there was something like that, there might be some problems on getting approvals from from countries which supply parts to Tejas, for the export to country, let's say like Egypt. So yeah, but yeah, that has not worked out. Hopefully next year, but that is not my prediction for for this year.
Generally, also India did sign some deals to export missiles and helicopters to certain other countries. So overall, our defense export sector is looking up, I would say.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So, okay, let's get to this 2024 year's predictions. So, Saurabh, what do you have for us?
Well, so I think that the experience of the Russia-Ukraine war and energy crisis and everything, I think the global community, especially in Europe and the developing world, there has been a renewed interest for nuclear energy. Many countries in the global south as well are, starting to express interest in building nuclear power reactors, or at least trying to start a program. So we saw like the two reactors of the UAE come online in 2023. So I expect that a country globally which does not have a existing nuclear power program will express an interest or show that they are interested in having a program in the first place. So I think that is what I think, that there has been a global interest in increasing financing for this as well. So if all this pans out, it makes it easier and cheaper for countries to access funding and promote nuclear power. So yeah, one country that does not have any plans or program for nuclear power will announce that they want one. Is my prediction.
Right. Yeah. First of all, hey, that's good news because finally the nuclear energy, the future seems bright for it, given all the geopolitical tensions we have and so forth. But the second thing, the question to you is, could you geographically pinpoint where or which this country is? That you think is going to be the likely candidate?
Yeah, no, I think okay. I would say that like perhaps one country in Europe is the most I can think, because I think that would be more kind of significant, because Europe has been kind of not the best performer in this field, but I mean they have like European Union by itself and countries in Europe have started to change the stance on this in the last few months, especially like last year. So perhaps one country in Europe would be on my list. Which one? I would leave it to the open, and hopefully next year when we revisit my prediction, it would be true to some extent.
Okay, fine. This time you've taken a larger gamble. Anyway, so sorry, you're sort of like spread your bets. Any case, thanks, Saurabh, for joining me and sharing your prediction. We'll come back to you next year and check on it.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to everyone listening.
Next up with me, I have Bharat Reddy. Bharat is a program manager of the Technology and Policy program at Takshashila. He's also a researcher with the High Tech Geopolitics program and currently is working on artificial intelligence governance. Welcome, Bharat, and a Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sri. It's great to be here, and Happy New Year to everyone who's listening as well.
So, Bharat, I'm very excited because you have not one, but not two, but not three, but not four, but five predictions to make today. So, before I hear all the five predictions from you, let's check on what happened with the forecasting you made last year. So, I think you had made two forecasts. So, how did they fare?
So the last year's forecasts were like part wish list, part prediction, to be honest, and it didn't go very well. So and good thing I didn't put any money behind it, only my reputation. So
right, are you putting money behind your predictions this year?
Let's see. I don't know.
Yeah. So what were the two predictions you made, and what happened to them?
So the first one was that the parking issues on Church Street would be resolved. So for those of you who know, parking on Church Street, they have these sensors that are installed on the road, and they have a payment app and kiosks where you can make the payments and all of that. So most of those sensors were not working, and during the year they did some fixing and all of that, and it started working for a month, and after that again it's back to where it was. But you can still find parking. You can pay the person who's standing there and all of that.
Yeah.
But the learning here, I think, is that there's always these principal agent problems. So you might put a person there, but they might have very different incentives than seeing that the state gets the revenue for whatever they've installed. Also, another thing is that you might have all of this fancy tech, but when you deploy it on the ground, there are challenges in how they are used and how people find ways around it and all of these things. So those are really important things that you can notice when you are looking at one place for a long enough time. And you make predictions about it and have to relook at it.
Yeah. So as a two-wheeler user on Church Street, I have no complaints, absolutely. So the parking remains free. I'm very happy about it. But yeah, what was the second thing that you said will happen in 2023?
So the second one was about decentralized social media platforms like Mastodon. I predicted that they will see an uptake in users, like they would double their user count by the end of the year. And that has not happened, unfortunately. It's more or less remained very much as it was at the start of the year. So I think again here a reflection is that the reason for my prediction was that there was a lot going on with Twitter. Musk was making a lot of changes and people are not happy. And even now you can see that over the past year the experience has kind of deteriorated, but still you don't see a lot of people moving out because of the network effects, platform power, all that you have invested in over the years, right? So it's difficult to make that exit once you have all of those into the thing.
But I believe Nitin Pai, the director of Takshashila, is quite active on Mastodon.
Yes.
So those of our listeners who are interested can go check him out. But anyway, let's come to 2024 now. So what's your prediction number one?
I don't know how to measure this, but I'll just make a statement about it. So a general thing is, I think that we've seen that there's been a lot of hype around AI this year. I think that will kind of stabilize. People will have more realistic expectations of the capabilities and limitations of AI. You'll see, we hope to see a more thoughtful debate and articulation of opinions in what we read and all of that. And I also, related to this, I also think that the application space in the AI ecosystem will see a lot of innovation. There'll be a lot of new products that we can use, new services that we can use. But there'll also be a lot of creative destruction that will happen because of the hype. There's so many people doing so many things, and a lot of them might not pan out. So that's one prediction. But I don't know how to measure this at the end.
Right. Yeah, but it still remains an exciting space. Like, for example, my friend was just telling me about an AI tool which can create music. It can write the lyrics for you, compose and sing. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, so what's your prediction number two?
The second one is that we have a lot of elections coming up in 2024 around the world. And I think that there might be instances where AI, especially large language models and so on, will be used to, say, influence the outcomes of these elections. It might be by spreading disinformation or by micro-targeting users based on their location, age, gender, race, whatever it is, right? So you can micro-target them and spread certain narratives that might influence the way they vote. And that, I think, will happen. There might be a few instances of that, during the year. And that might also influence how the regulatory efforts or the global debate around how AI should be governed. There might be stricter guardrails enforced if such incidents are happening. Yeah.
That's what, like, online disinformation has remained a problem ever since the online world began. But I think the AI is just going to amplify the issue. And like you rightly said, the world is going to see a lot of elections in 2024. And AI disinformation is a real concern as far as influencing voters during elections are concerned. So moving on, what's the third one that you have to say?
The third and fourth one are related to DPI. So I think India's digital public infrastructure, there's been a lot of talk about exporting it to other countries, especially in the context of the G20. There was a lot of talk around that. And I think we might see some of that happening in the next year. Around 5 to 10 countries might be adopting it. And that's a good thing, because a technology that we have developed in-house is being used for a critical infrastructure by so many other countries. And I think it might also help in that you will see a lot of learnings from those countries come back, and we might see improvements in the way we have built it as well. So that might be a
Right.
And the next one is again related to DPI. And I think one of the more interesting features of the India stack that we have not seen too many use cases of so far is the data empowerment and protection architecture, DEPA. So this basically allows users to transfer consent-based data sharing between parties. So I might have a bank history, and a creditor might want access to that to grant me a loan. But the creditor might not be able to do that right now very seamlessly. So it allows minimal consent-based sharing mechanism. So that's just one use case, but you might see a lot of other things like that gaining popularity in this coming.
Yeah. So I think there's something we witnessed with the G20 as well, right? India is aggressively pushing for other countries globally, especially in the global south, to adopt DPI from India and create identity stacks and so on. So let's see if 5 to 10 countries actually make serious efforts towards that. Yeah, your final prediction. Let's hear
The
that.
last one is that, so recently, just I think 2 weeks back, Google lost a case against Fortnite, Epic Games, about the fees that they charge apps on the Play Store. So they have Google and Apple, I think, charge a 30% commission on all payments on the Play Store and App Store. So I think this might either come down, or there might be some changes to the amount that they're charging. There's been a lot of criticism around it. A lot of awareness is building up, and they have lost this case. And I think that might have some kind of an effect in um, you know doing a course correction. Yeah. So that's the
Right. So
last
bad news for Apple and Google. Anyway, thanks a lot for sharing these with me, Bharat. And next year we'll come back and check each of these. I think we'll have a lot of breaking down and analysis to do. But thanks once again for joining.
Thanks, Shri. Happy.
So next up, I have with me Shambhavi Naik. Shambhavi is the head of research at Takshashila, and she's also the chairperson of the Advanced Biology Research Program. Welcome, Shambhavi, and a very happy new year to you.
Happy New Year to you.
Right. So, Shambhavi, you made some predictions last year. So, what happened to those? How did it pan out?
I made 2 predictions. One was for an mRNA vaccine for flu,
Right.
which from my throat you can tell did not materialize.
Right.
Otherwise, I would not have had this sore throat. But the other one was that we will have the world's first gene therapy, CRISPR-based gene therapy for sickle cell anemia approved, and that did happen.
Oh, wonderful.
So yeah,
I must
50%.
congratulate you, because yours is the only prediction that actually came true from last year's set, except 1 or 2 people I couldn't catch hold of this year. So anyway, congratulations on making a good prediction. So what do you have for 2024?
Okay. For 2024, I am part hopeful and part scared. Hopeful because obviously we have made a lot of strides in biotech in the last few years. Scared because the attention from governance, I think, has just dropped after COVID. So my hopeful prediction is that India will start seeing genetically edited crops being cultivated on our domestic soil. And if I stretch it a bit, I'm hoping that we will give approval to GM mustard for cultivation this year as well. My fear is that this year, given political fragility and given what's happening around the world, we might discover some bioweapon lurking around somewhere, someone doing research that is not up to what is globally accepted standards.
Right. So just on the first prediction, so GM mustard testing was authorized last year, right? And then like it hit some roadblocks. So you think the roadblocks will be cleared by the end of 2024, and in fact, it would get approval for cultivation, as in the seeds will be sowed in the fields. Is that
Right.
what
So
you're
it was approved for cultivation. Then there was a case in the Supreme Court,
Right.
and we are still waiting for that to resolve.
Okay.
I'm hoping that's resolved in favor of GM mustard.
Right. And on the second one, do you have any thoughts as to, who might be the likely culprits? Where can these bioweapons pop up from? What's going to happen?
No, I don't know where it will be. And if I could tell that much, then I wouldn't be sitting in this chair.
Right.
So I don't know where it will be. I'm pretty sure that work is being done across various countries, which might be deemed more controversial, might not be intentionally making bioweapons, but could be deemed controversial. But just given our stranglehold on other weapons, I have a feeling that, and our advanced technologies to detect bioweapons now, I just have a feeling that we might be able to uncover something.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Shambhavi, for joining me and making these predictions. And we'll come back to you next year to check on them.
Thanks, Shri, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. And like last time, I hope only one of your predictions come
The first
true.
one.
The first one. Right. Okay. So next up, I have Bharat Sharma with me. Bharat is a researcher with the Indo-Pacific Studies program at the Takshashila Institution and specializes in Quad studies. Welcome, Bharat, and a very happy New Year to you.
Hi, Shri. Happy New Year. Nice to be here.
Right. So I believe, Bharat, you have some predictions regarding Quad, which is the grouping between India, USA, Japan, and Australia. So, Bharat, what is likely to happen with the Quad in 2024, according to you?
Yeah, so I think a lot of things are happening, right? I mean, if you look at the Indian media today, there's so many conversations, so many dialogues, so many commentaries about what the Quad, will be like in 2024, right? There was a summit happening in January, unfortunately, it got shelved. So there's a lot of attention on the Quad today, especially in India. I think in 2024, what will happen is that you will see the Quad's role in the Indo-Pacific kind of really deepen, right? So it works in close to 11 domains across, climate change cooperation, cybersecurity, health, maritime security. So I think that its role and kind of its own agenda in the Indo-Pacific will deepen. And largely, I think from India's point of view, that will be the case because you see that India's relations with these three countries, right? Australia, the US, and Japan, they are already kind of ramping up in these domains, right? So the policy groundwork that you have with these three countries are already set, right? So if you have political willingness in these four countries regarding what the Quad will do or what it can do in the Indo-Pacific, I think you already, that cooperation will deepen because you already are working in these four domains, in these 11 kind of domains. I think, and specifically, let me make a riskier prediction. I mean, so it's kind of very common to say that the Quad will deepen its cooperation in 2024, but I think the more kind of concrete prediction is that I think defense cooperation will fit the bill for the Quad in 2024. And that's a riskier prediction. Let me also mention why, because Quad has repeatedly said that it will not do security stuff. It is not a security grouping. It is said that it's not a security alliance. It's said that it will not do kind of, it's meant for practical cooperation. So in terms of that, there's very little kind of headway that security stuff will kind of what it will mean for these four countries. But I think defense cooperation, which is, our listeners might want to know, is very different from it's a more specialized kind of domain as opposed to security cooperation, which is more broader.
So defense cooperation, I feel, will increase because there is even within practical cooperation, domains like humanitarian, disaster prevention, or illegal fishing, or a lot more kind of these maritime security domains require a more active military contribution. So the domains that the Quad works on requires that you do defense cooperation. Now you might say that sure, Malabar exercise already exists outside the Quad, in which these four countries participate and do exactly the stuff I mentioned. But I think because the Quad's kind of strategically, because across political leaderships there will be willingness to deepen the Quad, I think it might even institutionalize what defense means for these four countries. So specifically, I feel like maritime security is a domain that they work on, and I think defense cooperation within that grouping, it could mean that the four militaries participate in more active HADR diplomacy, military diplomacy or HADR cooperation. So I mean, their kind of military's kind of contribution to these domains will kind of ramp up, is what I feel.
Right. So, are you saying that there will be some sort of an agreement between these four in terms of defense cooperation, some defense deal, some defense technology deal, or something like that?
Right. So, I mean, there's already a lot of stuff happening between these four countries, bilaterally speaking. Which is why it makes me think that when it comes to the Quad, if strategically everyone's thinking about the same stuff when it comes to its role in the Indo-Pacific, I think you very well might have some institutionalization when it comes to. So there already is that kind of policy groundwork available. We have a bunch of agreements regarding maritime security with the US. We have a bunch of agreements with Australia. We have a bunch of agreements with Japan, intelligence and military and logistics supply, for example. So as I said, I mean, the policy groundwork is already, it's a very fertile ground. All you need is for the political leadership to press the button. Right. So I feel that will happen in 2024.
Okay, great. So anyway, the Quad leader level conference is happening early this year in India, and I believe Bharat, you'll have a lot more to say then. So looking forward to your work in this domain, and thanks for joining me. We'll catch up with you next year to check if your predictions have come true or not.
Thanks so much, Sri. Thanks so much.
All right, next up, I have with me Satya Sahu, research analyst with the High-Tech Geopolitics program at Takshashila. He works on semiconductor geopolitics and recently on AI governance. Welcome, Satya. And what is your prediction for 2024?
Hi, Shri. This prediction is something I hope doesn't come to pass, but seeing which way the winds are blowing right now, it very well might. The United States, in its strategic tussle with China, could be contemplating imposing export controls on open source technology like RISC-V. This is in line with their existing export sanctions on China related to chip making technology, equipment, and actual high-end semiconductor chips. Now, what is RISC-V? RISC-V stands for Reduced Instruction Set Computer, and it is an open source instruction set architecture, which is called an ISA, which is basically a set of instructions and functions that allows companies to develop microprocessor designs based on this specification. Think of it as the building blocks of the minutest kind of codes and designs that allow a semiconductor chip to function. Right, so like multiplication, addition, division, those are the very basic kind of ISAs. Now, unlike proprietary ISAs like ARM or x86, RISC-V is open source and is freely available. This means anyone can design chips without the licensing fees or intellectual property restrictions that come with proprietary ISAs as well. So consequently, it's become the go-to technology for countries which are aspiring to reduce dependency on costly chip technologies, and they also want to foster homegrown semiconductor industries as they begin to work towards resilience of supply chains. Now, the problem arises is that RISC-V has contributors from over 70 countries, and it's managed by a non-profit which is headquartered in Switzerland called RISC-V International. Now, they did it so that they can preempt potential geopolitical disruptions amidst the US-China tech war, But the problem that arises is because US export controls regulate not only the export of goods and technologies from its mainland, but also their subsequent re-export, including know-how, data, and blueprints, as long as they involve US origin technology or equipment. Now, RISC-V was developed by in UC California, Berkeley, and a lot of the people involved in it are also, and the companies involved in it are also US in origin. Now, the problem is RISC-V also has a lot of other takers, including companies from China and India. In fact, China, in the wake of the US sanctions on chip making technologies, has been using its companies to invest a lot more in RISC-V development, specifically so that they can, in the future, attempt to throw themselves off the yoke of US controlled technologies in the chip value chain.
No, so I was just wondering, of course, you hope that this doesn't come to pass. And it's kind of ironical that we're talking about export controls for open access technologies, right? Now, but if it's already open access, can you explain to me how will this sort of like a sanction or a control work? Because I believe by default, it's accessible to everyone. So how will the mechanics of it work?
Exactly. So that is one of the reasons why we think export sanctions on something like this is very difficult to effectuate, especially because it involves know-how and persons instead of actual hard technology and tangible hardware. Now the problem is, like I mentioned, the nature of US sanctions is such that they can sanction any technology or know-how as long as there is a component of US technology, US controlled technology, which is a part of it. Now there is no de minimis threshold for this, which is actually what you have seen in the latest round of sanctions. Now the way they can do it is by maybe using a use case kind of restriction for China. So instead of focusing on RISC-V technology as a whole, what they could say is if a RISC-V based design chip is now possibly going to be used for AI development, AI workloads or military use cases, then they can try to stop the proliferation of that knowledge itself. Again, it's very difficult because how do you control the movement of persons with the knowledge and know-how? However, what can actually happen is that at the fabrication stage, the supply chain, which the US already controls, alongside Netherlands, ASML, they can just straight up prevent the machinery needed to actually manufacture the chips, which is why we are saying that controlling open source hardware and technology is very difficult to do so. But there are ways, especially because the companies involved, like the Qualcomm and Nvidia, for instance, who are part of the RISC-V consortium, who are very instrumental in providing a lot of the newer developments in the architecture. If they are stopped from let's say proliferating the developments to the global RISC-V space and only to trusted partners, so to speak, then there's a problem, because then other countries will have to navigate a very fractured ecosystem.
Right. Okay, thanks Satya for joining me and making this prediction. I'll catch hold of you next year, and let's hope this prediction of yours does not come true, like you mentioned, because it'll be a big blow to open access movement worldwide, I believe. Thanks, and a very happy new year to you.
Same to you, Sri.
All right, now I have with me Sowmya Nandan, the head of corporate affairs at Takshashila. Welcome, Sowmya, and a very happy new year to you.
Hey, thanks, Shri, and happy new year to you and all the listeners as well.
Great. So, Sowmya, I had Bharat earlier who made 5 predictions. I believe even you have a total of 5 predictions. So, I'm very eager to find out. Quickly tell me. So, what's your first one?
Okay, so I think the digital health is going to take a big leap, and not just the COVID phase. I believe that the next one will be more of AI and the wearable tech that's going to solve for shortage of nursing staff and others in the hospital setup. So I would say the digital health revolution is going to peak up in 2024.
Oh, that's great. I think the wearables market is already growing in India as people become more health conscious and so on. And with the health stack that is being built by certain bodies in the country, that's a very exciting space to watch out for. So what's the second one?
Yeah, with health, we should also talk about fitness. Why leave that, right? So I believe that the bid for the Olympics is going to come true, and we are going to host Olympics. So it's not an aspirational one. I think we're going to make it.
That's great. So India has bid for the 2036 Olympics, and you believe
Yes.
India will win the
Yeah.
bid. Wow,
Yes.
that's great. And I would love to see it happen, mostly because, it's never happened in the history of a country, right? So it's going to be a
Yeah.
first. Of
Yeah.
course, there'll be a lot of debate about whether it's desirable and blah, 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 and so on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, it's going to be an exciting event. What do you have next?
Okay, so on the Olympics itself, one to tag along is I feel twin cities should be the option for us to go with. So I believe that Bangalore, Mysore would be a good option, though I know Delhi is being considered with Gurgaon maybe,
And
but
Ahmedabad also, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Different enough, yeah.
So on that note, the third prediction I have is the Bangalore is going to go hyper local with tourism. We have already started doing it. We see it with dosa walks, the tree walks, or even the theater thing like Ranga Shankara or BIC doing stuff. But I feel this is going to be replicated by many other cities. And I think in small pockets, it's happening in Hyderabad, Delhi, Mumbai kind of places. But I see that people are going to latch on to hyperlocal experiences and immersive kind of experience that's going to surge up the tourism side of things, and I think it'll be more an experiential one.
Yeah, that's great. And Bangalore, I see like a lot of efforts have been put in from civil society actors in making this happen, right? See, for
Yes.
example, like Delhi has a natural advantage. It has so many archaeological sites and the tourists
Right.
will always be attracted. But for
Yeah.
Bangalore, I see there's a concerted push now to, spread Bangalore culture, talk about our
Yeah.
art and all the places that we have to offer.
Yeah, we just finished the Bangalore Hub also, right, Shri? Just
Yeah,
about 2 weeks back. Yeah. So
that's right.
that's
So
my prediction. Yeah.
do you have any cities in mind which might, like sort of follow Bangalore, like maybe one or two which you believe has a
I
lot of
think Pune can replicate it really well. I think very similar to Bangalore kind of vibe. Whenever I'm there, I feel that I'm, in an extension of Bangalore. So I see that as one
great.
place which will potentially build up.
So for all those listening from Pune, here's the challenge: make Sowmya's prediction come true in 2024. Right. So
Yeah.
What's the fourth one?
Yeah. So on that note, it also ties in well in the fourth one. The corporate social responsibility ties in with the Schedule 7, where there are certain things that certain categories that are listed under CSR, education, and things like that. But I feel the one that's been lacking for the longest is the heritage side of things, and I believe that the next year we are going to see good spike in CSR money coming towards preservation of heritage. And I think slowly corporates will build appetite to, ensure that we protect what we have, we build up and make it places where people come and visit, appreciate, and give enough infrastructure around it. So I hope to see that happen.
Right. And I believe there's already a government program which allows companies to adopt a particular monument and sort
Yes.
of like, take up
Yes.
the
Yes.
maintenance and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you think
Not
this
enough is done, Shri. That's
right,
the challenge.
right. All right. Okay. And what's the final one?
Yeah, so since we went all over the place, let's also talk more on the international side. I feel Australia's investments into India is going to increase and create more job opportunities as well. And also on the academia front, the tie-ups that's already been happening, we are going to see more partnership conversations with universities where we are going to have, India, Australia collaborate on that front. So I see that next year is a game changer in that sense. We will also be thinking of new ways of collaborating. So, from the hyper local to the international, this is what I have in terms of predictions.
Right. So, very good year for India-Australia relations of 2024, according to you. That's great. I mean, we are fierce competitors in cricket, but let's hope we can find areas of collaboration between the two countries. But thank you,
Right.
Sowmya, and I will come back to you in a year to check on these predictions and see how well we have fared.
Yeah. Let's hope it's all coming true. It shows promise.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Shri.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.